It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change your attitude, change your life. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. You're listening to us in your neighborhood from coast to coast and around the world. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Joan Herman, author, speaker, and your host. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life brings you interviews with some of the most inspirational and influential people in the world. It's our goal to educate and empower you so you can live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. We have another great show for you today. Joining me is Tom North, author of the book, True North, The Shocking Truth About Yours, Mine, and Ours, the award-winning film based on his family, which starred Lucille and Henry Fonda. According to Tom, who is Helen's second eldest son, the Beardsleys were anything but blissful and had deep, dark secrets. Tom is an inspirational speaker who works to raise awareness about domestic violence and child abuse. Welcome, Tom. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on your show, Joan.
Well, Tom, it's really a pleasure for me to meet you because I have to admit, the movie Yours, Mine, and Ours was always one of my favorites. So when I learned about this story, I really was shocked, and I am interested in speaking with you about it. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
So, Tom, for our listeners who may not be familiar with the story Yours, Mine, and Ours, tell us about your family.
So the story goes all the way back to 1961 when my mother, Helen North, who had 8 children and was a widow, met a man named Frank Beardsley, who was a widower with 10 children, and they decided to get married. Now, when you add 10 and 8 together, that equals ridiculous, but that's what they did. So they got married and had 2 more within the next 3 years. Lucille Ball saw the story in the newspapers because it was a human interest media story at the time. And she called my mother and stepfather and said, I want to make a movie about the merger of these 2 large families. And she did. It was called Yours, Mine, and Ours. It was very funny because we're talking about Lucille Ball here. And it was heartwarming, it was entertaining, and it was a financial and critical success. Lucille Ball won a Golden Globe for her portrayal as Helen North Beardsley, my mother. And the irony is that it was 180 degrees in the opposite direction from what the children were experiencing at home. That's sort of the backstory of why I wrote True North, The Shocking Truth About Yours, Mine, and Ours. Most of what went on in the home was shocking.
Tom, how old were you when this was occurring, when the movie was being made?
So when my mother married Frank Beardsley, I was 7 years old. The movie was not made until some years later because Lucille Ball was involved with her Broadway career at the time. And so the film wasn't started until 1965, and it wasn't completed and released until 1968.
Do you think anyone in that production was aware of what was going on within the family, or were your parents so good at keeping it quiet? And we're going to talk more about what actually was happening.
Actually, Lucille Ball came to Carmel, California, where we lived and where I still live, and visited because that's what actors do. They go to learn the character that they're going to play. And when she met my mother and stepfather, very soon after that, she took my mother aside and she said, "You keep that man away from me," because she picked up on his energy. And the problem was that he was psychotic and he was dangerous to be around.
Well, you know, when you describe it as your family having deep, dark secrets, what are we actually talking about?
So in the words of my younger sister, Frank Beardsley was an ultra-violent, alcoholic, misogynistic pedophile. So those are pretty difficult words to string together in the description of one human being, but that's who he was. So he was dangerous to be around. My mother married him because she was afraid he was going to severely harm or kill his children. and she wanted to save them from him and save him from himself.
Now, Tom, what about Frank's family? Are any of his children in agreement with what you're saying?
No, it's a really interesting question, Joan, because there are only 5. There's 20 children total, and there are only 5 who are supportive of the book that I've written, obviously myself and 4 others. And there are 15 of them who have been trying to forget this childhood trauma all their adult lives, and they don't want anything to do with it.
So what type of abuse really occurred within that family on a daily basis?
Well, it was on a couple of occasions I came around the corner in the hallway, and Frank was standing there, and I never knew what was going to happen when he was around. And so he knocked me across the room, and I got up and dusted myself off and said, "What was that for?" And he said, "Just for drill." And so he was physically abusive. He was emotionally abusive. He sexually molested most of the girls as they approached or passed into puberty. And so that, and of course my mother was intending to save his children from him, but the stresses of raising that many children and being responsible for all of the logistics of running that household on a daily basis, plus having 2 additional children afterwards, just wore her down. And she ended up feeding the children to him to save herself. It's not uncommon for that to happen in abusive households.
Now, you've written this book now. Is this the first time that any of these claims were ever made, or did anyone ever go to the authorities?
Well, what happened, of course, this was the 1960s, and family authority was really unquestioned at that time. Unless there was, murder or something, the authorities did not look into what was going on inside families. My 2 sisters and I, after one particularly harrowing evening, when I was about 10 years old at this time, and we went to the local Catholic church to get help. And I spoke to the priest, and he told him what was going on, and he looked at me and he said, "Tommy," he said, "I want you to go home and apologize to your father for saying bad things about him." And I said, "Well, number one, he's not my father." And he said, "Oh, certainly he is." Because he was so into rigid authority structures. And so he just wouldn't accept what we were saying. And then the next day, of course, we walked away from the church realizing that there was no one who was going to help us. And so the next day, my mother called me aside in the afternoon when I had come home from school, and she was livid, and she said, "I have never been so embarrassed as when Father called me this morning and told me what you had told him." And she looked at me and she said, "You listen to me, young man, and you listen good." She said, "If you ever tell anyone what goes on in this household, it'll be the last thing you ever do." And that was her perspective. She wanted to protect the image that was created by yours, mine, and ours.
Tom, what you just described, you do a lot of work with children that are experiencing abuse within the home. Is that a common scenario? Do they get told that by the parent, I guess, that's in denial?
Well, I don't deal much with parents who are in denial because they don't talk to anybody. They don't want to be seen or heard, and they conduct their abuse of their children in private. And this is a major characteristic of abusive parents.
So they would, the response, I guess what I'm getting at is the response that you received from your mother. Is that a common response that children looking for help may get?
Yes, it is. And so this is one of the reasons why I wrote the book. It's because children who are victims of domestic violence and child abuse end up feeling shamed and guilty as though they had done something wrong, and they tend to isolate themselves and have a very difficult time integrating the emotional trauma that they have experienced as children when they really don't have the ability to process that information. It goes into their memories, and those memories are stored in their bodies. And it creates difficulty for them later in life.
Now, Tom, how were you able to move on? I mean, have you healed, and what was a turning point for you?
So that's a great question. When I was a teenager, I was a mess. I was self-medicating with recreational drugs, and I suffered from severe depression. It was a very difficult time. I had no self-confidence, and it was really, really hard. When I was 22 years old, I was introduced to transcendental meditation, what most people call TM. And that was really the beginning of my road to recovery. I began to throw off stress, accumulated stress in my body almost immediately. And it was amazing to me and amazing to the people around me to see the changes that I went through, all very positive changes.
So you've been able to find peace.
Well, it's a daily thing.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation is cumulative. We meditate and then we meditate again, and every time we meditate, we touch that little center of ourselves that is divine, and we bring a little bit of that out with us into a daily activity, and gradually and slowly, but it's almost unmeasurable, but over time, we accumulate a much more positive energy about ourselves. So I've been meditating now for 38 years, and I wouldn't miss it because it's been so beneficial to me in my life.
Tom, did you also seek out any type of therapy to deal with the side effects of what you experienced?
I've been in therapy most of my life. In fact, I started when I was about 17. I had a friend, and I write about this in the book. I had a friend whose father was a psychiatrist who was instrumental in the development of what we call the humanistic movement of the 1970s. And so I was very fortunate to have that resource available to me. But what happened later in the book, it's chapters 26 and 27 in the story, as I write about the family therapies sessions that I took the entire family through. And so there were 14 children, and eventually both the parents joined in the family therapy sessions.
Now, Tom, you're involved with National CASA. Tell us about this organization.
So CASA is a wonderful organization that advocates. Of course, CASA is an acronym that stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Children. And what CASA does is when children are removed from their homes because of conditions of domestic violence and child abuse, they're placed in a foster care situation. And so the folks at CASA, the volunteers there, advocate for these children and check in on them and make sure that they're not being abused in the foster home and make sure that the legal wheels that have to turn to facilitate the care of these children are turning in the children's favor. And they really do step up and advocate for these kids. And in most cases, it's the only positive connection with adults they have.
The book is True North by Tom North. If you'd like to get more information about Tom, you can visit his website, truenorthbytomnorth.com. Tom, in our remaining moments, what would be something that you would like to leave our listeners with?
The most important message of the book is that life isn't fair, and a lot of people have to deal with difficult childhoods. But in spite of the difficulty that we experience as children, we can pick up the broken pieces of our lives and put them back together again and become happy, well-adjusted, productive human beings. And that's really the message behind True North, the shocking truth of yours, mine, and ours.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us today and for bringing awareness to us about children who are experiencing the unthinkable in their home, and also for reminding us that no matter what we go through, there's always hope and healing is always possible. So thank you for joining us.
Joan, thank you very much, and I love the title of your show, and it means a lot to me and a lot of other people as well.
We'll be right back. Hi, this is Joan Herman, host of Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Did you know that Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life has a free monthly digital magazine that can be read online or emailed to your inbox? Every month, nationally recognized leaders in their field provide information to educate, inspire, and motivate you. We believe in a holistic approach to life, incorporating mind, body, and spirit. Check out a copy of Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life 24/7. Visit cyacyl.com and be sure to tell your friends. We all want to live happy, productive lives, but sometimes we just need a little help. Our Coach on Call experts provide strategies to help you live your best life now. Joining me today is Louis Soto Jr., a transformational life coach, personal trainer, speaker, and author of the book, Awaken to the Brand New You, The Path to Reinventing Oneself. Louis is the founder of New Life Living. Welcome, Louis. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Joan, for allowing me to be on the show.
Louis, people are always talking about the importance of strengthening the core when it pertains to fitness. And you're a personal trainer, so that's part of your job to help others strengthen their core. But you also believe that we are comprised of different cores, a physical core, a spiritual core, and a mental core. Let's look at each of these, and let's begin with the physical core. What is our physical core, and how is it a foundation to achieving our ultimate potential?
Well, our physical core represents strength, vitality, and power. The physical core is what allows us to take care of our everyday activities, take care of our errands, take care of the kids, handle transportation, whether it be public or in the car. And it's giving us the energy that we need to accomplish all our goals.
So what then is the spiritual core?
The spiritual core is your essence, where you come from. And the spiritual core is really allowing yourself to tap into pure consciousness, really the universal mind, the quantum law, that we are all connected. And we're just a thought, a being in consciousness. And when we start to tap into this substance, then we have something to fall back on when life doesn't go the way that we plan.
And the third core, the mental, how does that differ from the spiritual and the physical cores?
The mental core is really focusing on tapping into the power of your brain and your mind. And it's really about breaking down old beliefs, behaviors, attitudes, and implementing new things every day in your life. I always tell my clients to take a 30-day contemplation practice, whether that be meditation, journaling, reading spiritual books, doing yoga. So then this starts to really break down the old way that people will respond to situations, and you'll be able to be more conscious and aware when your old behavior comes up, and therefore you could interrupt it and start implementing and ingraining new beliefs in your subconscious mind.
Louis, what happens if any of these cores are weakened or not functioning properly?
I believe that if we're not focusing on developing all the elements, what our core is made up of, then it's really hard for us to live, number one, our full potential. And we're draining so much excess energy every day, because if we're not tapping into these elements of our core, then we're just focusing on the past. And anything from the past is draining energy from your vitality and your being.
Louis, what advice can you offer us to get focused on strengthening all of our cores?
I'd say the first step is to set an intention and start honoring your being. Start honoring your physical self, your emotional self, your spiritual self. Say to yourself, this is the time that I'm going to really tap into my greatness. And from making that decision, that intention will start to create and to attract situations, people, and circumstances that coincide with that desire.
Louis, thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about this topic or to learn more about Louis, visit his website, newlifeliving.org, and be sure to get a copy of his book, Awaken to the Brand New You. you for joining us today. We hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that the information provided are the opinions of our guests and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on the site, listen to past shows on demand, read the digital magazine, take part in the book club, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.